Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back once again, and it's D-Man the Great here, and I'm here to talk today about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And in today's episode will be the start of me ranking the Marvel Cinematic Universe movie by movie. And as of today, there have been 23 releases technically in the entire series, but we're about to get into the technically anyways. And the first off, we have we're gonna start at number -1, which is the Incredible Hulk. I'm not gonna get too much into the Incredible Hulk. It technically counts as an MCU film because it had Stark in there, and I believe Nick Fury might have been in there as well. And then they had Thunderbolt Ross that they put in. That he's kind of really the only tie-in to this film as a whole, and necessarily it doesn't really mean much to the series at all. Besides those two little the end credit scene with Stark saying, "Oh, we're building a team," and then the Thunderbolt Ross thing came back in Civil War of Captain America Civil War, which will be further down the list. But that's the first film on here. It's not really a big deal. I don't count it as a part of the MCU because it doesn't count. It's not a Marvel Cinematic Universe film. It doesn't have Mark Ruffalo, and Mark Ruffalo probably is the acting wise, just due to the time period he exists in, possibly, well, he probably is the best Hulk in my opinion, just because of the opportunities he had as the Hulk and just having everything. But we're gonna get into we might have to make a whole separate video on that now that I've mentioned all of that, about what happened to the Hulk and what made the Hulk, what destroyed the character of the Hulk. And we're gonna get into that later on down the line. But let's really kick off the ratings proper with number 22, Thor: The Dark World. Now, the reason why I have Thor: The Dark World at the last spot on this list is because it necessarily was a good Thor film. It's a good film, period. Every film in the MCU is a good addition to the MCU, and there's really not any major stinkers. Well, there's not any stinkers in the entire universe so far, or as a whole. And then this Thor: The Dark World is a solid film that shows it. It's not the best film to watch. If you want to introduce somebody to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that is not the film. It's not at all. They'll be bored out of their minds or just unamused, uninterested. And you got if you're gonna draw somebody in, it's not the film. Pros of the film is it's a big blockbuster film. It feels like more of a blockbuster than the first Thor and a few of the other MCU films. Like, it has that big Iron Man blockbuster Avengers feel to it, and that's what you really want to go for with these films. That's a really big point for me. And the cons are, Loki is the main character. It's a kind of a slower film. The action isn't really memorable at all. I mean, you remember some shots from like the trailer, but they show you all those in the trailer. And the emotion of the film should hit a lot more than really hit the way you want it to in majority of the ways, and the emotion just doesn't go all the way you need it to go. And then we're gonna hop into the next one. So the next one is Iron Man 2, and Iron Man 2 is a pretty good film. It hurt a lot to put it this low on the list, but I'd say Iron Man 1 being Iron Man 2. I mean, Iron Man 2 is probably the weakest Iron Man film as it doesn't really have a good story at all. So we're gonna kind of just hop into the pros and cons real quick. So the pros of it is Black Widow, the introduction to Black Widow. We got to see some stuff from that character and some really good action sequences from her, and it has that big blockbuster feel that I was just telling you about for Thor, that Thor had. All of the Iron Man films have that big blockbuster feel to them, as well as the Avengers. And it has that big blockbuster feel that these bottom movies really don't have as much. And the cons of Iron Man 2 is it kind of drags pretty hard outside of the action, because like really, as a fan of the big action, big fights, I really enjoy films that have the best action sequences. And Iron Man 2 doesn't disappoint in that regard, but they disappoint story-wise, and they disappoint pretty much it's kind of drag outside of that, really analytically looking at it. And then we're gonna hop into another one, is we're gonna hop into the original Thor at number 20. And the pros on Thor 1 is it's a nice intro to Thor, and it has a pretty decent story. Loki is done well in this film. It's a good introduction to him. You get to really break into his character, which leading to the Avengers was gonna be a pretty big deal, what we didn't know at the time. But you get Loki as a villain before, and you get to see the humble origin of that character, and you get to see Thor become a better man in story. You get to see him become a better man and get to become the hero he would eventually become to the universe in storyline. And then the humor from the human characters in the film was amazing. Just like in Thor: The Dark World, you get some funny tidbits and funny lines from the human cast that they got on there. But that's pretty much like, that was really one of the only positives for Thor: The Dark World, which I had down, was that the humor was pretty great. Alright, and then the cons of Thor 1 are weak delivery, because it has a it should have been way more big fight feel than it really was. Because really with Thor, you kind of don't really have the full scope of everything. You don't have the full scope. You get the story and how it's done, but you don't have a reason to care too much about it. You don't have the reason to care about it, and that's not good from a huge blockbuster, big movie film. And Loki is not the star of this one, which is a big pro as well. I forgot to say that. Loki's his story is pretty good. And then it doesn't have any standout points that just like, oh my, but it has some points where it's kind of just, oh whatever, boring. The stakes aren't really high in the film as well. It's not like there's not big danger to it in the entire film. You get to really see a little bit of, you don't get the emotion like you do in Thor Dark, like you don't get that emotion. You don't get the emotion much like Thor: The Dark World didn't give you the emotion. So Thor really lacks the stakes. Alright, and number 19 is Iron Man 3. It's the end of Stark's one-man show arc, the end of the Iron Man films. We got one more Iron Man film down the line, but we got Iron Man 3 right here at 19 because it's a pretty solid into Stark's arc. And you eventually see that Stark's arc is really supposed to end in Iron Man 3, but it continues on in the following Avengers films, because after this was the first film released after the Marvel's The Avengers in 2012, and it came pretty close after, a year after, and it was really a big fight feel like the other ones, big blockbuster film. War Machine is amazing in the movie. Don Cheadle does this thing as Iron Patriot and War Machine. It's just a solid film for that character. And I'd say it's a really good close to the trilogy. You get some really good closure on. You get really good closure on the characters, and you get to kind of head on this new arc into the next Avengers films down the line. Cons are the villain Mandarin was a solid villain, but it was kind of weak, and the movie really lacks until you rewatch it. So it's pretty much up to the mind of the watcher to make the stakes real, to make it important, to make it seem. But it's much like I'm gonna break into the kind of a future con for like every film down the list, because a lot of the solo films in the of the sort, and they pretty much get conned pretty hard because they have to live up, or they have to face off against the Avengers, which is the big team up film, which has every single actor moving it, pushing it, doing their thing. And that's the kicker for a lot of these films, is that they gotta live up to the Avengers, and those are big movies where all the stars are there, the games are being played, it's a big fight feel in every single film. And that's what all the Iron Man films lack in. It's what all the Captain Americas, except for one, lack in. And it's pretty much what all the Thors lack in as well. So I'm gonna close out the first 5 off of that, and I'm gonna thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.